In nature, there is no waste. As humans, we've created, accepted, and perpetuated this idea of garbage, but in nature, nothing is wasted. You can see this in the forest. When a tree sheds its leaves, those leaves fall to the ground and become nutrients in the soil. And this is the basic idea of composting. With compost, we can look at our food scraps, yard clippings, and coffee grounds as potential fertilizer for the soil. This idea that all materials still have value is at the heart of all my projects. In this video, I'll create a compost tumbler to recycle my kitchen waste, and I'll build this out of all materials that have been disregarded as waste. So, I need to find the materials to build this thing. The goal is to spend very little money and not buy anything that's new. This limits me to things that I can find at thrift stores or anything that I can find discarded around my area. This leads me to the first thing that I found. I'm going to get a barrel. Yeah, so I found a barrel in a ditch, which was super lucky and definitely helped to jumpstart this build. While we watch that come together, let's talk a little bit about composting and why you should definitely be doing it.
Composting is the process of recycling natural materials. Okay, I'm not gonna do that voice. But composting is the process of recycling natural materials. So these ingredients that you'd put into your compost are typically broken down into a few different categories. You have your greens, your browns, and then oxygen and water, the other two really important ingredients. Greens are primarily for nitrogen, so this includes fresh grass clippings, fruit scraps, and coffee grounds. And then you have your browns, which is primarily for the carbon, and this is things like dead leaves, twigs, and paper. So basically anything kind of from the kitchen, you know, like if you're cutting up veggies and the onion, like the end of the onion, the banana peel, shell of an egg, all that type of stuff can go in your compost, and that's your greens. And then also finding things in your yard. So with those ingredients, there's two basic types of composting that you can do. There's cold, also called passive composting, and then hot, also called active composting. So with cold, it's going to be a little slower to break down the material, but it takes a lot less effort. So this is, think about just like the basket in someone's backyard that's filled with everything. You just shovel things into an area and it kind of naturally will decay and degrade and become compost. This is called cold because it doesn't reach a very high temperature. And then your other type of composting is hot, and this will be a lot quicker, but it takes more effort to maintain. So with hot, you can get compost in as little as 4 weeks. Could still take up to a year though, but it will really reach a high temperature because of all these reactions going on. And this high temperature is good because it can kill a lot of diseases and bug larvae and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different reasons that we should be composting more. For one, there's just so much food waste, especially in America. I've seen numbers of 30 to 40% of food is wasted, and this sounds incredibly high to me, but I've also worked at grocery stores and then also just been an American human, and I see how much ends up in dumpsters. And then even when you eat at home, I mean, think about how much food sometimes you let go bad, whether that's produce or just a plate that you didn't want to finish, but it's not really worth making leftovers. So it's a great way to recycle basically food and that type of material. Composting also reduces the need for chemical fertilizers, so it's just a more natural process, and those fertilizers don't end up in our rivers, lakes, and other water. Composting also encourages production of natural beneficial bacteria and fungi, and this just helps make soil way more nutrient rich and healthy, and thus we grow healthier food. And then also composting reduces methane emission from landfills, so that lowers your carbon footprint. So the type of compost that I decided to go with is a form of hot composting. I'm building a compost tumbler. So at this point in the build, I finished up the stand, which came together really nicely. Some of the kind of recycled materials I ended up being able to use for that was just some wood that I actually found for my previous project, the bike barn, the barrel, of course, that I was lucky enough to find in that ditch. And then I also went to Savers, which is a local thrift store, and found some of the other things that I thought I might need. The one thing I did end up using was drumsticks, and the drumsticks were part of the stand and how the whole thing pivots, and I thought that was kind of a fun use for those. But then at this point, I'm just cleaning out the barrel, and cleaning out the barrel was actually kind of an interesting, thing, because I ended up thinking a lot about kind of, one, what was in the barrel. It smelled kind of weird, quite frankly, and I didn't want that in my food. And just in that regard, thinking of how soil and the things that are in our soil do become our food. So it's really important to have good, high quality soil. And just thinking through that part of kind of the food production process was a new insight that I hadn't thought about before. And that's kind of a cool thing about making this project, was thinking a little bit more about just the food source and how we, how food ends up at our table. It's not magic. But then anyway, at this point, I'm building the latch to close the door. And the latch is not my favorite part of this project, but I was really trying to not buy anything new. So I ended up just, cutting up a piece of plastic that I found and kind of making this sliding latch thing. Then there's probably some modifications I will make moving forward, but it's a huge tumbler and I'm excited to get going on it, get composting some things. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and will consider subscribing to see more sustainable builds. I'm really excited to keep exploring these ideas related to reusing things, repurposing things, and also just how we can be better stewards of this beautiful planet. See you next time.